Kitchener, hockey is a major part of this community, and East Avenue is where that all unfolds each week. And to help keep you guys up to date with what's going on, here are two guys who love the game of hockey and their Kitchener Rangers, Mark Coker and Ryan Farwell.
It's time for episode 10 of the East Ave Blue Report. The regular season is over and it's going to be Kitchener versus Guelph in the first round. But first, let's recap the season. Kitchener Rangers obviously played 68 games and they ended up with 34 wins, 30 losses, 3 overtime losses, 1 shootout loss for 72 points. That put them 5th in the conference, 3rd in their division, and 18 points behind 4th place Guelph. Now it's time for the story of the season as told by Ryan. There was definitely a lot of storylines, whether you go from the rookie production, the early season hype, or there was a little bit of lull in the middle. Maybe you want to talk about a 50-goal scorer. Yes, we had that this year. Ryan, why don't you break down the 2018-19 Kitchener Rangers season?
Yes, this season was a surprising one indeed. And it was surprising in good ways, it was surprising in bad ways, and it was surprising in ugly ways. One example of the ugly way, you remember when Jay McKee called out his OAs? Moving forward, the preseason showcase allowed us to see the youth movement that was the Kitchener Rangers for the 2018-19 season. One where we got to see a lot of firsts, a couple of milestones, and one where we got to see a couple of goalies who leave us scratching our heads at times. Obviously, we know the big names from last year. They're not here anymore. The hot start to this season, 3-0 it was, had us questioning, is this team actually going to keep this traction all season long? The answer, God, no. What happened? Luke Richardson was acknowledged for being goaltender of the week or goaltender of the month for the CHL. What happens next? Looks like he shouldn't be in the OHL.
Also, I just want to give a side note on how weird this OHL season was. Coming into the season, Flint was supposed to be good. Just remember that.
Yeah, I thought Flint was pretty good this year. They're going to get a great player. Possibly help out Ty Dellandrea. Back to the Rangers.
What would you say that you're talking about the 3-0 start and then the wheels kind of fell off? What were your expectations heading into the season for this team?
Expectations before any regular season game was played. You and I kind of looked at each other, looked over the roster, looked over the names, saw the last year point production from those who existed, checked out the AAA midgets, saw what they could do, and, well, we thought they'd be, at best, a middle-of-the-road team. They'd be lucky to be above 6th in the conference. But it turns out, Owen Sound Fire sold the team, Erie wasn't too hot, and, well, that kind of left the door open for Kitchener there because Sarnia didn't have the same players they did either. Traded away Adam Ruzicka, who was a big threat to the Rangers. And what do you know? They ended up in 5th. Fantastic. They took opportunities, punched open the door, and said, well, this is our spot now. We saw a lot of firsts this year. Rookies obviously scoring their first goals. Langdon, Falad, Sabrango, Dickerson, to name a few. We also saw a couple of bad moments. One of the rookies went down. I believe it was Carter Tresser, who ended up with a pretty bad lick and kind of abruptly halted his season, so that was a little sad to see. And knowing that parents are trying to keep in mind what's best for their teenage sons playing this game, the beautiful game of hockey, it kind of brings them back down to earth and realize that this game isn't what they once thought it was, and there's a lot of larger people out there. So hopefully Tresser comes back stronger than ever next year and proves that it was just a one-time scary event. Of those rookies, the one that shined the brightest, I think is a unanimous decision that it was Donovan Sabrango who shined the brightest. And speaking of Donovan Sabrango, Mark, what does he do as for the history of the Kitchener Rangers?
Well, I think when you watch him play out there, you just see examples of great Kitchener Rangers defensemen in his play. You see some Scott Stevens, you see some Al McInnes, and a bit of Larry Murphy. I like the fact that he's a younger player, but he played with a physical presence in this league, and that is not easy to do. And like you have mentioned to me, he also got some multi-goal games. And another thing, that's not easy to do for a defenseman, let alone a young defenseman in this league. So I really just think as a rookie season, not only did he show he can do a bit of this, or he's a really good defenseman, I think he showed that he could be the impact player for this team for the next few years.
All in all, it was a season that you didn't want to miss on East Ave once again. It was unbelievable as we got to see career highs, career firsts, a goal scorer erupt out of nowhere, scoring 10 times as many goals as he did last year. To put that into words is unbelievable. To break down some of those players, first, we're going to go straight to Joseph Gareffa. You thought we might be going to somebody else, the story of the year, but I think Joseph Gareffa is a 1A story of the year. Number one being obviously the 50 goal scorer, but 1A, let's put an asterisk right there. Joseph Gareffa set another career high for points in a single season. Last year, it's because he has Adam Mascarin. The year before, it's because he has Bracco and Mascarin. Who does he have this year? He has himself, he has Ricard Hug, he has Greg Morellas, Nick McHugh at the beginning of the year, who we thought was possibly actually going to show up. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Who did show up? Joseph Gareffa. He's the man. 87 points, 32 goals, 55 assists. The only thing that people may consider a blemish, we here don't. He was a minus 25. What does that mean? He's on the ice. Big moments, small moments, any moments. You can rely on Joseph Gareffa.
I think going from someone that everyone was talking about coming into the year to, someone that not many people were talking about, Jonathan Yancis. Yes, he is the 50 goal scorer. He had 50 goals, 23 assists, 73 points in 68 games played, and he's the first winner of the Don Cameron Award for a 50-goal scorer in the first season that Don Cameron is no longer with us. So just a great story all around. And Ryan, speaking of all around, how is his play all around that net?
His play all around that net is gritty. And the reason I say that, rebounds, wrist shots. He picked off corners that we didn't think were even available at times. He's got a great shot, but he's got quicker hands to finish off those rebounds. And a funny thing I just remembered, first game of the year, there was a little bit of a friendly wager across all the broadcasters home-wise to who was going to score the first goal. I remember who won. Most of the people weren't very happy because he's always the public eye and everybody knows him. But he chose Jonathan Yancis. People coughed up the bills. There he is, waving all around his cash. But Jonathan Yancis set the tone for the year, scoring the first goal for the Kitchener Rangers this year.
Moving from Jonathan Yancis, I want to talk about someone that I was a little bit harsh on at the start of the season, Greg Morellas. He ended up with 35 goals, 61 assists, and 97 points. But at the start of the season, I kind of saw a player who definitely has skill and could be a very good contributor to this team, but he would stick handle himself into a position where he would just have to make a bad pass. But I think as this season went along, you really saw the maturity in his game and realizing that I can almost put up more points by giving it to someone coming down the ice with me, because who knows, they'll give it right back and then I have an open net, or I can just collect an easy assist. Well, that showed because he was the team leader in points. So I just wanted to say, Greg Morellas, you have come a long way. And once again, I think my criticism kind of has to be taken back at this point because you have proven me wrong.
Next up, a guy who did not play all 68 games on the OHL regular season schedule. He played 10 less to be exact. Riley Damiani. And in those 58 games, 85 points, even, no plus or minus there, 30 goals, and 55 assists. Think about those hot streaks, though. He'd go out, have 5 assists in one night. Next night, he'd tweak his ankle, let's say. Miss a couple of games. Gets suspended for a fluke. Shoots a puck, somehow finds its way over the glass. Puck had eyes, I swear. But he still hits 85 points, despite all the odd occurrences, let's say. If he was there all 68, I think he would have been top point getters in the league. Perhaps right there, 1 or 2. Who knows? We can't figure that out. We're not fortune tellers. But I do solidly think he would be in the top 10.
And unfortunately, like the OHL, they don't have the advanced stats that some of the higher leagues like the NHL do. But I think the fact that Damiani came home with an even over the course of a season just shows that he's a skilled player, but he really takes pride in his defensive game too. And I think that's the whole NHL mindset. He knows that at the next level, he's going to have to create offense out of his defense, and he really, really takes pride in that.
Lastly, the huge mid-season announcement by Coach Jay McKee. It's Ricard Hug, Captain O Captain. In 62 games played, he had 33 goals, 40 assists for 73 points. Ricard Hug being from Sweden, we knew he was going to have the soft hands. We knew he was going to be able to dance. We knew that he was going to have a wrist shot that rivals the likes of Peter Forsberg. At this age, I should add. I said it was a put-up or shut-up year. What did he do? He goes out and he puts up. Puts up to the point that he's named captain. The second ever Swedish-born captain in Kitchener Rangers history. Who was the first? Oh, right, maybe the youngest captain in the NHL. I shouldn't say in the NHL. At the time, he was named the youngest captain. Youngest captain in the history of the Colorado Avalanche. Former Ranger himself, of course, Gabriel Landeskog. So if history repeats itself, I think Ricard Hug's going to have a pretty solid future in front of him. Mark, I want you to break down those 2 goalies that we had.
Well, like we talked about earlier in the season, it was a very hot start for Luke Richardson. And I think, the season kind of played out as it was supposed to for him. He played in 50 games. He came out with 28 wins, 19 losses, 2 overtime losses, and 1 shootout loss with a 3.52 goals against average and a .890 save percentage and 3 shutouts. Obviously, when he did start out that hot, we were thinking to ourselves, wow, maybe he really took the opportunity of learning from Mario Kalina and he was going to apply it on the ice. But I think this is just an example of sometimes you do plateau as a player. Luke Richardson is a very serviceable goalie in the OHL. There's definitely worse options that you could have, but I just think although he has moments where he comes up big and he's making saves that you sometimes didn't expect him to make, he just isn't going to take that next step and steal you a playoff series. He will keep you in it, but he won't steal it for you. And someone else who started off very good in the season, it was Lucas File. At one point, it was really a goalie battle because after Richie had that hot start, he was struggling. And people were saying, wow, is File really going to take it from him? But you kind of saw the young goaltender struggles in the OHL play out. He had 6 wins in 27 games played with 11 losses, 1 overtime loss, and a 4.20 goals against average for a .870 save percentage and no shutouts. I know that sometimes he was able to steal a game, like in London. He stole the one game early in the year. What do you think File will bring in the future? And also, why don't you break down what you thought of Richie's performance overall?
What I think File can bring in the future, he showed glimpses that he tracks the puck fantastically. He sees the puck, he fights through screens to see where it is, tracks it, makes a stop. Rebound control is where he has to work on. Doesn't always put the rebound where he should, and that's what haunts him. And then it's an easy one-timer and easy pickings for the opponent. And London figured that out after that first game and really, really, really exploited that. As for Luke Richardson, I think we've seen the best that we can see of him. There's times where Luke Richardson will go on a hot streak, and that hot streak will always, without a doubt, make everybody in the building question, is Richardson going to keep this up? And we get brought down to we get brought back down to earth very quickly, because it's going to be the next night or within 2 nights that question is asked by anybody. Richardson will go back to what we see and what we expect. It's not to say that it's bad, just we know that he's not going to be the elite goaltender. But, as you said, he'd be a solid option for a lot of teams in this league. Elite goaltending in junior hockey is extremely hard to find. So you kind of go with what you have. And a great example of this, the Guelph Storm. Anthony Popovich isn't the greatest goalie in the league. He knows it. We know it. But if you have a goaltender who can win you games and you have a solid defensive core, keep him. Because you can steal games then. And Luke Richardson has done the same. Luke Richardson has won some games that maybe he shouldn't have won because he stood on his head. Maybe his team didn't play so great. But he has provided us the opportunities and helped us reach 5th place in the conference. That isn't too bad.
And just a few side notes pertaining to the plus minus that I found interesting when looking at stats. There were only 2 players that started the season with Kitchener and ended the season with Kitchener that had a plus rating. That is Michael Vukojevic with a +3 and Kyle Gentles with a +5. And I think it's almost kind of positive that it's coming from 2 of your defensive players, because then you know that there is some stability back there. And going back to what you just said with the Popovich and Guelph example, if your defense can just tighten up and you have a serviceable goaltender, then you never know what could happen. Also, on that topic, Cole Cameron ended with a -6 overall, but when you look closer at his stats, he was -16 when he came over from North Bay, meaning that he was a +10 with Kitchener. Obviously, he doesn't play the most minutes, but once again, just a positive look for that defensive core. Now, going into the final topic, let's actually talk about what's here right now. It's Guelph in the first round of the playoffs. People had kind of been, wanting this matchup for the past few weeks, but it's almost been kind of a formality that it was going to be these 2 teams in the first round. Going into the series, obviously Kitchener looks like the underdog. If you had to put a bet on a team and you wanted to actually win the bet, you probably would put money on Guelph. But for Kitchener to win the series, they're going to need a few players to step up. I'm going to go out there and say that Alexei Lipanov will be the key if the Kitchener Rangers win the series. And the reason I say that is because you know who the team has. Jonathan Yancey, he will score some goals in the series. Morella, Scarefa, Damiani, Hug, they're all going to show up. But once you get Lipanov playing well, and he has looked better at the last few games of the season, I really think that will just add some depth to this team that then can somewhat negate the depth of Guelph. What would your key to the series be?
I think he was sort of the key to the entire season. And it's a little weird to say that, considering that there's been a lot of stories with a lot of the forwards and defensemen, how they've been playing. But I'm going to go Luke Richardson. And the reason he's the key, we don't know how he's going to play in the playoffs. We don't know if he's going to be great. We don't know if he's going to be middle of the road. We don't know if he's going to be nervous going into the Sleeman Center as the guy. He didn't have the opportunity last year when they were a threat to win it all. What's going to happen this year? What I personally believe is going to happen, much like last year when we were the top seed, not the top seed, but the higher seed of the round, I think that they're going to push it to 6 games. but more so, I think they're going to steal 1 or 2 games in Guelph.
So you're saying that Guelph is going to win the series in 6 or Kitchener's going to win the series in 6?
It's most likely going to be Guelph, but judging how the Rangers have owned the Sleeman Center in the past 2 or 3 games that they've played there, I'm not so sure that Guelph has the home ice advantage.
My prediction for the first round of the playoffs is that Kitchener is going to walk out of Guelph in Game 7, and they're going to be headed to the second round. And we're going to be back here for episode 11 of the East Ave Blue Report, breaking down what a fantastic series we just witnessed.
And you mentioned a fantastic series. Overall, this has created some fantastic memories, Mark. I want to know, what does this rivalry, aside from the regular season, I want to know what this postseason rivalry.
So I'll give a little bit of a side note here, but obviously I grew up cheering for the Kitchener Rangers. But at one point in my life, I volunteered for Rogers TV. And when I was volunteering there, I had chances to work the Guelph Storm games, being a camera operator. And it was the 2016 season when Guelph was so good and won the OHL championship that I was filming them. So I always kind of have this affinity for Guelph because I respect them and I love going to see games in the Sleeman Center. So for me personally, I love every single time that these two teams match up because I always know that there's just an energy about it, and to me, I just feel it in a different way.
To me, this series, it not only proves dominance as for who owns Highway 7, let's say, but it also proves bragging rights. Not amongst the fans only, but amongst the players. Because they know how far away that distance is. And when I say far, I really mean short. It's less than 40 minutes. It's a treat to have this playoff series. No travel, no hard traveling to Sault Ste. Marie one day, next day you're back in Kitchener. None of that. They have a sweet gig in the first round. But I'm going to talk about my most fond memory. It may have been in 2016. I'm not fully remembering exactly when, but it was an Easter dinner that I had at my grandparents' place. And my grandpa knew how big of a hockey fan I was, and he decided to slip me an envelope underneath the table. On it, it said, "Do not open at the table, go to the bathroom." So what do? I was like, maybe excused, slip it into the back pocket. It was super, super slick. Nobody noticed this. I go to the bathroom, I open it up. 2 tickets to sit in the mezzanine row to the game between Guelph and Kitchener that night. Couldn't name what players other than Tyler Bertuzzi.
Was it the team with Dickinson and Fabry and all of that?
Thank you. See? Rogers TV Guelph man. There you go. That's who it was. Fabry, Dickinson, Bertuzzi, all there. Rangers, I wish I could remember too. But anyhow, there was a massive hit. One of the guys on Guelph goes right into the bench. The coach at the time, he was hit by the stick, a little bloodied up by it. And the fans got a little too riled up because wobbly pops were a thing. What happens? Glass is being pushed behind the bench. The glass smacks him in the head. Fans are rowdy. And what happens? He turns around, says some selective terms. Mark might have to bleep a couple of these things out here. First time in one of our episodes. But anyhow, I go over to the section, ask a couple of folks, what did he say? Word for word, I will say what he said. I will jump over this glass and rip your fucking guts out. That is my most fond memory. Final of the game, the Rangers ended up winning, so it was pretty cool to see that moment. But it's one of my all-time favorite moments just because the coach definitely got a little rattled. It looks like it was Bill Stewart was the coach at the time, and Giovanni Smith was even still there. Forgot about that. Noah Carroll, to name a couple. Isaac Ratcliffe. My goodness. But What do you know? Another one that I'll add, the Guelph fans are fantastic. They add such an atmosphere to the auditorium, as well as the Rangers traveling to the Sleeman Center.
On a side note, the Guelph fans really, really are fantastic, and I promise this will be our last story, but every single intermission from filming the Guelph Storm games, there was this elderly gentleman that sat beside me, and we would chit-chat occasionally, but right as I went to lock my camera and take my headset off, I would look down, and on cue, every single intermission, he would hand me a Werther's caramel. And he was a season ticket holder, and I loved him so much. That just shows, I think there's something about Canadians in general. Obviously, we're known for being nice, but then when you just put us in a hockey arena, obviously it could go badly. It could, if there's some wobbly pops involved, but for the most part, everyone just wants to love the game.
And obviously, as you mentioned, Mark, hockey unites Canada. Doesn't matter if you're as big of a city as Calgary or as small of a town as Miramichi. Hockey unites us. That being said, this Friday from the Sleeman Center is the first game of the first round of the playoffs for both the Guelph Storm and Kitchener Rangers. Starting goalies that you should be able to expect being Luke Richardson and Anthony Popovich. It's a little obvious unless something drastic happens during one of the practices that one of them go down. Now, without further ado, we hope the rest of your day is the best of your day, because we're going to put a nail in this coffin. That's episode 10, everybody. Thanks for listening. For Mark Coker, I'm Ryan Farwell. That's another edition of the East Ave Blue Report.